welcome to another episode of Accessibility. It's a show on YouTube where I talk about the video game industry, accessibility, and representation. Basically, how can we help more people to play games and more people to see themselves in the games they play? Now, on paper, my hearing's pretty good. I don't have any hearing loss in either ear, but I frequently have to make use of features in video games that are designed for deaf or hard of hearing players. I'm on the autism spectrum, and I have audio processing issues. I sometimes just can't filter sounds, and I miss important audio cues in games. And features that are designed for deaf or hard of hearing players are frequently really helpful for me as well. Apparently, around 15% of adults in America report some form of hearing loss, and features in video games that support deaf or hard of hearing players, 15% is a lot of people. That's a lot of people that you can make it more able to play games if you support deaf and hard of hearing players. It's not a small number of people, and thankfully the video game industry is largely doing a lot of the right things to help deaf and hard of hearing players. It just isn't standardizing them or always doing them to the right degree of complexity that they should be. So today I want to talk about the things that video games should be doing to help deaf and hard of hearing players, the things they are doing, and the things they need to just polish up a little bit. When it comes to accessibility settings for deaf and hard of hearing players in video games, the obvious option setting most people think about first is providing subtitles to players. At this point in time, most big budget video games contain option settings for subtitles, but not all subtitles are created equal. Firstly, you need to make sure that your video game allows you to activate subtitles before the game's first cutscene. You can't leave a player watching the opening cutscene without subtitles while they wait for the chance to pause and turn them on. If you desperately want to do a fancy cinematic intro that jumps straight into the story with no menus, default to subtitles being on and let players turn them off when they reach gameplay, if they choose. Additionally, subtitles need to be available in large font sizes, as well as easy-to-read fonts that put legibility over aesthetic. Don't give players a line of size 12 text written in a medieval font full of fancy flourishes and unusually crafted letters. Give players subtitles that can be easily read, preferably in dyslexia-friendly sans serif fonts. If you'd like to learn more about dyslexia-friendly fonts, you can find a link to my video about dyslexia support in video games down in the video description below. In a perfect world, video games would give you the ability to alter your text size, your font of choice, the backdrop behind your subtitles, would allow you to just tweak and tweak and tweak those settings to make them as legible and as readable as possible, because the more readable that text is, and the more you can read it at a glance, the less time you have to spend deciphering that text, and the more time you can spend looking at the rest of the screen, enjoying the rest of the video game. Like, good subtitles take up as little of your attention as possible, and the more we work on these features, the more that deaf or hard of hearing players don't have to exclusively focus on the subtitles. They can glance at the subtitles and then back to the rest of the game. Beyond that, give players an option to place a background behind their subtitles to help them stand out more clearly against the video game they're placed over. Use different colours to highlight who's speaking a line of dialogue, and if possible, point an arrow in the direction of the speaker. Basically, take as many cues from The Last of Us 2 as possible when it comes to subtitle options. The easier to read your subtitles are, the better. And this is important. Make sure your subtitles cover things that are not just cutscene dialogue. Make sure that important NPC dialogue in combat is subtitled. Make sure that important sound effects like explosions are subtitled. Make sure that changes in music are subtitled when they're important. This past week I was playing Paper Mario: The Origami King with the sound off, and one quest in the game signalled its end with a change in music, but no visual cue to accompany it. It took me several minutes to realise that I could have already progressed the game because I had completed the objective, but there was nothing visual to tell me that. Beyond subtitles, if you want your game to be accessible to deaf or hard of hearing players, you need to make sure that you give visual cues for any gameplay vital sounds in the game. Most games today will give you the option of an on-screen indicator showing where a bullet that hit you came from, but in a lot of games that's barely scratching the surface of the audio-only information the game is trying to give you. Is a monster charging up to attack you in Astral Chain? Could you tell that based on some visual that displayed the roar was happening? Or would you be expected to rely on the noise it made? If an enemy player in a first-person shooter fires at another player just around the corner from you, but out of sight, does the game indicate that to you? You need to make sure that if your game has a gameplay mechanic mechanic conveyed to you with sound, that a visual component is available too. Next, and this should be obvious, but you need to make sure that your game doesn't partway through lock progression behind audio-only cues. A great example of this is the Lost Woods in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Players are expected to follow the sound of Saria's ocarina music to navigate a forest with multiple false paths. Players who are deaf or hard of hearing can sort of bodge their way through navigating most of the puzzle by sort of walking up to these pitch black doorways and seeing if they turn into real doorways, but the final set of doorways doesn't have a visual indicator. You have to walk in based on the music. Deaf or hard of hearing players would either need blind luck to progress or would need some form of walkthrough. There is no way to reliably know without audio cues how to finally get through that forest. Another example of a game that locks progression behind sound very late into its adventure is the puzzle game The Witness, which, after hours and hours of being a purely visual-based puzzle game, starts to introduce audio-only puzzles with no visual component and no warning. I came across this because when I played through The Witness, I largely had the sound off and was listening to podcasts. It was not a game that I felt the need to always listen to the sound on. I had no idea that I'd come across a quest that I couldn't complete without sound. There was nothing to tell me that. Lastly, for hard of hearing players, the ability to customize your sound mix can be really important. Allow players to turn down music, for example, so that they can better hear audio cues that they may be relying on, or better hear dialogue in cutscenes. Additionally, don't be like Pokemon Sword and Shield, which for some baffling reason locked its sound mix customization behind a random NPC who was not signposted several hours into the game in the second town. Let players who have partial hearing prioritize the sounds that they need to hear the most. A lot of things that video games could be doing to help deaf and hard of hearing players are already being done. They're not being done consistently or to the level of quality that we often need them to be. Most games at this point have subtitles. We need them to be able to be large, to be in clear fonts, to have them highlight who's saying them. We need very clear, well-presented subtitles. Most games have some degree of visual cues to match audio cues, but we need those visual cues to be consistent. We need everything that has an audio cue to have some kind of visual cue if it's important to gameplay. Most games offer some form of audio mixing, but we need to make sure that there are lots of options for how to mix the audio and that none of those are locked behind an NPC a few hours into your game. Fucking Pokemon Sword and Shield, I'm looking at you. Where a lot of areas of video game accessibility still have big mountains to climb, have a lot of work to be done. A lot of these settings are nearly there. We need to refine them, we need to standardize them. So many of these settings not only help the 15% of Americans who have some form of hearing loss, but also help the hearing community. A lot of these are really helpful for people like myself who have technically perfect hearing, but also struggle with audio input. Like, there's so many groups that good visual cues help, and we're so close, there's no reason that we shouldn't, at this point in our industry, be able to standardize these things. Look at the movie industry. The movie industry has standards for how they do subtitles, and video games really need to catch up on that front.